You know what's funny? She actually thinks she's the one holding this family together.
She thinks she deserves better, but she really is a fool for working this hard.
Yes, she knows she is my servant, but I won't tell her that. Let the fool keep working.
Danielle was 39 years old, and until that Tuesday night, she thought her marriage was simply difficult, not broken. For almost 11 years, Danielle Brooks had convinced herself that exhaustion was just another word for love. She woke before sunrise, packed lunches, answered work emails while brushing her teeth, and moved through Atlanta traffic with one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding a cold cup of coffee she rarely had time to finish. By the time she came home, she was already thinking about tomorrow. And somehow, she still smiled when her husband asked, "What's for dinner?" His name was Terrence Brooks. He was 42. And for the last 3 years, Terrence had been unemployed. At first, Danielle had defended him. She told her mother he was looking for the right opportunity. She told her friends he was working on something. She told herself that every marriage went through seasons. But somewhere between the 5th job she took to keep their household afloat and the moment she heard Terrence describe her to his family as a servant, Danielle finally understood something she had been too afraid to admit. She wasn't in a difficult season. She was carrying a marriage by herself, and what she didn't know was that Terrence's family had been watching her struggle from the beginning, not with sympathy, with satisfaction. Because they had a plan for Danielle. A plan that would make her question every sacrifice she had ever made for the man she loved. Brett. 3 years earlier, Danielle had been the woman everyone admired. She worked as a medical billing specialist during the day, but she had never been the kind of person who believed one paycheck should determine the limits of her future. So she built herself into a one-woman economy. Monday through Friday, she worked at the medical office. 3 evenings a week, she cleaned 2 small commercial buildings. On weekends, she drove for a delivery service. When business was slow, she picked up catering shifts. And during tax season, she helped an elderly accountant in her neighborhood organize paperwork for his clients. 5 jobs, 5 streams of income, 1 household. Terrence used to joke about it. "You trying to buy Atlanta?" he would say, laughing as Danielle walked through the front door carrying another work bag. She would laugh too. Maybe. Then he'd kiss her forehead and say, "That's my woman." Those moments mattered to her. Because once upon a time, Terrence had been different. When they first met at a community fundraiser in Decatur, he was charming without trying to be. He made Danielle laugh so hard that evening, she nearly spilled sweet tea on her dress. He remembered tiny details. Her favorite music, the way she liked her eggs, the fact that she hated driving in heavy rain. He used to leave handwritten notes on her windshield. "Have a good day, beautiful. Don't forget to eat. I can't wait to see you tonight." They married 2 years later. Their first apartment was small, but they loved it. They ate takeout on the floor because they couldn't afford a dining table. They celebrated their first anniversary with a homemade cake that collapsed in the middle. They laughed until midnight. They dreamed about owning a house, having children, traveling, growing old together. And Danielle believed she had found her best friend. That was why she didn't recognize the change when it began. It didn't happen all at once. Terrence didn't wake up one morning and become cruel. He became comfortable. Then entitled. Then indifferent. And finally, he became someone Danielle barely recognized. Second mind. The first warning sign came after Terrence lost his job. The company had downsized. Danielle understood. She hugged him that night while he sat silently on the edge of their bed. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. Terrence nodded. "I'll find something." And she believed him. For the first few months, he sent applications. He attended interviews. He updated his resume. Danielle never complained. When the unemployment checks stopped, she picked up extra hours. When their savings started disappearing, she worked weekends. When their mortgage payment increased, she took another cleaning contract. "I don't want you doing all this," Terrence told her one night. Danielle smiled tiredly. "I know. I mean it." I know. I'll make it up to you. She kissed his cheek. You don't have to make anything up to me. We're married. That was the sentence that would haunt her years later, because Danielle meant it. Terrence eventually stopped looking for work. At first, he said the market was terrible. Then he said employers were discriminating against older workers. Then he said he wanted to start a business. Danielle supported that too. She gave him money to register the business, bought him a laptop, paid for business cards, even helped build his website after coming home from a 12-hour shift. Terrence promised it would pay off. It didn't. Months passed, then a year, then another. Danielle's life became a cycle of working, paying bills, cooking, cleaning, sleeping, and repeating. Terrence's life became television, his phone, occasional errands, and long afternoons on the couch. Still, whenever Danielle tried to talk about it, he had an answer. You knew I was struggling. I'm trying. You make everything about money. You're always tired. You don't act like my wife anymore. That last sentence always hurt the most, because Danielle wanted to scream. I'm tired because I'm acting like your wife, your provider, your cleaner, your driver, your accountant, and sometimes your mother. But she didn't. She swallowed it. She kept going. Could. Then Terrence's family started coming around more often. His mother, Patricia, was the kind of woman who could make an insult sound like advice. She lived 20 minutes away in a comfortable brick house and had never liked Danielle's independence. You work too much, Patricia would say. Danielle would smile politely. I have responsibilities. Patricia would glance toward Terrence. A man needs peace when he comes home. Danielle heard the message underneath those words. She just wasn't ready to confront it. Terrence's younger sister, Kiara, was worse. She was 29, unemployed herself, but somehow always had money for restaurants, vacations, and designer handbags. Whenever Danielle asked how she was doing, Kiara smiled. I'm figuring life out. Danielle wanted to ask what that meant. But she didn't, because Terrence always defended them, their family, and Danielle had always respected that. Until one Saturday afternoon, she came home early from a catering shift. The house was quiet. She walked into the living room and saw Terrence sitting on the couch with his mother and sister. They stopped talking when she entered. Danielle froze. What? Patricia smiled. Nothing, sweetheart. Danielle looked at Terrence. What were you talking about? Nothing, he said. His voice was unusually sharp. Danielle placed her purse on the table. I thought you said your mom wasn't coming over today. She doesn't need an invitation. I didn't say she did. Kiara rolled her eyes. Here we go. Danielle stared at her. Here we go with what? Terrence stood. Danielle, I'm tired. You're tired? The words escaped before she could stop them. Terrence's expression hardened. Yes, I'm tired. She looked at the clock. It was 2:17 p.m. Danielle had been awake since 4:45 that morning. She had already worked 6 hours. Terrence had been home. Yet somehow, he was the tired one. She walked into the kitchen. I'm going to make something to eat, Patricia called after her. That's probably best. Danielle stopped. For a moment, she wanted to turn around. Instead, she kept walking. That evening, she sat alone at the kitchen table after everyone had gone. Her dinner had gone cold. She stared at the 3 empty chairs across from her, and for the first time, she wondered whether being needed was the same thing as being loved. Sup. The next few weeks became stranger. Terrence started guarding his phone. He took it into the bathroom. He turned it face down. He changed the password. Whenever Danielle entered a room, conversations suddenly stopped. She noticed. She said nothing. One Thursday night, she came home from cleaning a dental office. It was almost midnight. Terrence was asleep on the couch. His phone was lying beside him. The screen lit up. Mom, we need to talk about Danielle before Sunday. Danielle's heart skipped. She stared at the message. Then another appeared. Kiara, he can't keep letting her control everything. Danielle stood completely still. Her first instinct was to wake Terrence. Her second was to pick up the phone. But she didn't. She walked away. She went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. She had spent years believing the problem was between her and Terrence. Now she wasn't sure. Maybe the marriage had never been just the two of them. Maybe there had always been other voices inside it. Sunday came. Patricia invited everyone over for dinner. Danielle almost didn't go. She had worked that morning. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt. She wanted nothing more than a shower and 8 hours of sleep. But Terrence stood in the doorway holding his keys. "Come on. I'm exhausted. My family expects you." Danielle looked at him. "And what do you expect?" Terrence frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "Nothing." She picked up her purse. "I'll come." The Brooks family home smelled like roasted chicken, macaroni and cheese, greens, and cornbread. The dining room table was beautifully set. Everyone was there. Patricia, Kiara, 2 of Terrence's cousins, an uncle, even Patricia's longtime friend, Mrs. Coleman. Danielle immediately felt like she had walked into a meeting she hadn't been invited to. She sat beside Terrence. He barely looked at her. Dinner started normally. People laughed. Stories were told. Then Patricia placed her fork down. "I think it's time we talk about something." The room became quiet. Danielle looked at Terrence. He didn't look surprised. Her stomach tightened. Patricia continued. "Family has to be honest with each other." Danielle slowly put down her fork. "About what?" Patricia sighed. "About the situation in your marriage." Danielle's heart began pounding. Terrence finally looked at her. "Mom." "No," Patricia said. "We're doing this." Kiara leaned back in her chair. Danielle looked around the table. Nobody seemed uncomfortable. That frightened her more than anything. They had expected this. Patricia folded her hands. "Danielle, you're a hard-working woman." Danielle said nothing. But sometimes working hard doesn't make someone a good wife. The room went silent. Danielle blinked. "What does that mean?" Patricia looked at Terrence, then back at Danielle. "You've made Terrence feel small for years." Danielle almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd she didn't know what else to do. "Small?" "Yes." "How?" "You make more money than him." Danielle stared at her. "That isn't my fault." Kiara spoke. "You remind him of it." "When?" "Every time you complain about paying the bills." Danielle looked at Terrence. "Do you believe that?" Terrence didn't answer. That silence broke something inside her. Not loudly, quietly, like glass cracking beneath water. Danielle's voice softened. "I've never thrown money in your face." Terrence finally spoke. "You don't have to." She stared at him. "What does that mean?" He rubbed his jaw. "It means I know how you look at me." Danielle shook her head. "No, you don't," Patricia interrupted. "Terrence deserves a woman who respects him." Danielle looked directly at her. "I've respected him for 11 years. Patricia's smile disappeared. "Have you?" "Yes." "Then why does he spend his days feeling like a failure?" Danielle's eyes filled. She looked at Terrence again. "I never called you a failure." He looked away. "But you made me feel like one." The room seemed to shrink. Danielle could barely breathe. She had worked herself sick, trying to protect the man sitting beside her. And now he was sitting silently, while his family blamed her for the consequences of his own choices. She pushed her chair back. "I think I need to go home." Terrence grabbed her wrist beneath the table. "Sit down." Danielle looked at his hand, then at his face. "Let go." He released her. Patricia sighed dramatically. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Danielle stood. She reached for her purse. Then she heard Kiara whisper something. Danielle couldn't make out the words. She was almost at the doorway when Terrence spoke. "Fine." She turned. He looked embarrassed. Angry. Defeated. And then, in front of everyone, he said something that made the entire room go silent. "She's always been better at working than being a wife." Danielle's face went numb. She stared at him. The man who had once written, "Have a good day," beautiful on her windshield. The man she had stayed awake for. The man she had financed. the man she had defended. He looked at her as though she were the problem. Danielle swallowed. Is that really what you think? Terrence didn't answer. She nodded slowly. Okay. She walked out. No screaming. No tears. No dramatic scene. Just silence. She drove home through Atlanta traffic, with both hands gripping the steering wheel. When she reached her driveway, she sat inside the car for almost 10 minutes. Then she finally cried. Not because Terrence had insulted her, because she suddenly realized how long she had been begging someone to appreciate sacrifices he had already decided were his entitlement. That night, Danielle didn't sleep. At 3:14 a.m., she got out of bed. She walked into the kitchen. The house was dark. She opened the cabinet where she kept their financial documents, mortgage statements, bank records, insurance paperwork, tax returns. She began sorting everything. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking like a wife trying to save a marriage. She was thinking like a woman trying to understand her own life. She discovered something strange. A series of withdrawals. Small at first, then larger. Money had been leaving their joint account for months. Danielle stared at the statements. She checked the dates. Then she checked again. Some withdrawals happened while she was working overnight shifts. Others happened on weekends. One account appeared repeatedly. She didn't recognize the name. Brooks Family Consulting, LLC. Danielle frowned. She had never heard of it. She searched the business registration on her laptop. Her heart began beating faster. The company was registered to Terrence. But that wasn't the shocking part. There was another name attached to it. Patricia Brooks. Danielle sat back. No. She opened another statement. Then another. Thousands of dollars. Money she thought had gone toward household expenses. Money she had worked 5 jobs to replace. Money she had sacrificed sleep, weekends, and pieces of herself to earn. It wasn't gone. It had been redirected. Danielle's hands began to shake. Then her phone buzzed. A text message from Kiara. You shouldn't have left dinner like that. Danielle stared at it. Another message appeared. You really don't know what's going on, do you? Her breathing stopped. She typed. What am I supposed to know? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, Kiara replied. Ask Terrence why Mom has the deed. Danielle froze. The deed. Her eyes moved toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where Terrence was sleeping. The house they had spent years paying for. The house Danielle had nearly destroyed herself working to keep. She whispered to herself, what deed? And then her phone buzzed one more time. This time, it wasn't Kiara. It was an email notification. The subject line contained only 6 words. Urgent. Property transfer documents attached. Danielle opened it. Her eyes moved across the first page, then stopped. Because the signature at the bottom was hers. Except Danielle had never signed it. And suddenly, the betrayal she thought was about disrespect looked much bigger than she had ever imagined. Danielle stared at the document until the words began to blur. Her name was printed beneath the signature. Danielle Renee Brooks. She knew her own signature. She knew the slight upward curve at the end of the last name. She knew the way the first letter of her middle name leaned slightly to the right. But this wasn't hers. Someone had copied it. Someone had taken her identity and placed it on a document, transferring an interest in their home. Her hands went cold. She immediately forwarded the email to herself. Then she took screenshots. Then she photographed the screen with her phone. Years of working 5 jobs had taught Danielle something important. When something didn't make sense, document everything. She didn't confront Terrence that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table until sunrise. At 6:07 a.m., she called the attorney whose number appeared on the email. A woman named Evelyn Harris answered. Good morning. Harris Law. Hi, Danielle said, forcing herself to remain calm. My name is Danielle Brooks. I received documents from your office concerning a property transfer. There was a pause. Which property? Danielle gave the address. Another pause. Then Evelyn's voice changed. Miss Brooks, I think you should come into the office. Why? I'd rather explain this in person. Danielle's heart sank. Did I sign those documents? I can't verify that over the phone. But did you witness my signature? Another silence. No. Danielle closed her eyes. Then why is my name on them? We need to discuss that in person. I'll be there this morning. She ended the call. Behind her, a bedroom door opened. Danielle turned. Terrence stood in the hallway. He looked exhausted. Who were you talking to? She looked at him for several seconds. Work. He nodded. Then he walked toward the kitchen. Is there coffee? Danielle almost laughed. The question was so ordinary. So painfully ordinary. After everything she had discovered, Terrence still wanted coffee. She stood. Make it yourself. He stopped. What? You heard me. His eyebrows pulled together. What's wrong with you? Danielle looked at him. Nothing. Then she picked up her purse. I'm going to work. You're not making breakfast? No. Terrence stared at her. For 11 years, Danielle had been the woman who made breakfast even when she had worked late. That morning, she walked out without looking back. Evelyn Harris's office was in a modest brick building in downtown Atlanta. She was a careful woman in her early 50s, with silver-framed glasses and the kind of calm expression that made Danielle believe she had seen every kind of family disaster imaginable. Evelyn placed the documents on the desk. I need to ask you something first. Danielle nodded. Did you authorize Terrence Brooks to transfer your interest in the property? No. Did you sign this document? No. Did you give anyone power of attorney? No. Evelyn leaned back. Then we have a serious problem. Danielle stared at the papers. What exactly did they do? The document appears to transfer your ownership interest into an LLC. Terrence's company? Evelyn nodded. Brooks Family Consulting. Danielle swallowed. But why would he do that? That is something you'll have to ask him. Danielle looked down. How much of my house is actually mine? Evelyn gave her a direct answer. Based on the records I reviewed, you have a significant ownership interest. Danielle exhaled. And if someone transferred it without my permission? Then the transfer can potentially be challenged. Potentially? Because we'll need evidence. Danielle immediately thought of the email. I have evidence. Evelyn looked at her. Good. For the next hour, Danielle showed her everything. The email, the suspicious signature, the bank statements, the withdrawals, the company registration, the messages from Kiara. Evelyn studied each document carefully. When she finished, she folded her hands. Danielle, I'm going to say something you may not want to hear. Go ahead. This may not have started with the house. Danielle's stomach tightened. What do you mean? If money has been moved from a joint account for months, and property documents were prepared without your authorization, then the property transfer may have been the end of a larger plan. Danielle looked at her. What plan? Evelyn shook her head. We don't know yet. That answer frightened Danielle more than anything else, because suddenly, the strange behavior, the family dinners, the whispers, the hidden phone, the accusations, they all seemed connected. Hurl. That afternoon, Danielle didn't go home. She went to the bank. She asked for complete statements covering the previous 3 years. The banker printed them. Danielle sat at a small desk and began highlighting transactions. The pattern became obvious. Every few weeks, money disappeared. $500, $800, $1,000, sometimes more. Most of the transfers went to the LLC. Others went directly to accounts she didn't recognize. Then she saw one payment that made her stop breathing. $18,500. The description read, down payment, property acquisition. Danielle stared at it. She checked the date. It was 8 months earlier. That was the month she had taken her 5th job. The month she had worked 14-hour days because Terrence told her the mortgage was behind. She remembered that period vividly. She had slept in her car between shifts. She had skipped lunch. She had cried in a grocery store parking lot because she didn't know how she was going to keep everything together. And while she was doing that, $18,500 had left their account. Danielle called Evelyn. I found something. What? Danielle told her. Evelyn became quiet. Do not confront him yet. Why? Because we need to understand where the money went. Danielle looked at the statement. I have a feeling I'm about to find out. She did. 3 hours later, Danielle discovered the property. It was a small rental house on the south side of Atlanta. The ownership records showed the LLC, but there was another detail. The property was being rented, and the monthly rent was going somewhere. Danielle followed the payment trail. The money went into a personal account belonging to Patricia Brooks. Danielle leaned back in her chair. Her mother-in-law had been receiving rental income from a property Danielle had unknowingly helped finance. She wasn't angry anymore. She was numb. That evening, Danielle went home. Terrence was sitting on the couch watching television. He glanced at her. You're late. Danielle placed her purse on the table. I know. Did you eat? No. There's food in the fridge. I don't want it. Terrence turned the television down. You've been acting strange all day. Danielle looked at him. Have I? Yes. She sat across from him. Terrence, did you create a company called Brooks Family Consulting? His face changed. Only for a second. But Danielle saw it. Yes. When? A while ago. Why? Business. What business? Why are you interrogating me? I'm asking a question. He stood. I don't have to explain every business decision to you. Danielle stared at him. Even when my money is involved? Silence. Terrence's expression hardened. What are you talking about? The $18,500. His eyes moved away. Danielle saw it. The truth was written all over his face. Where did it go? Terrence said nothing. Where did my money go? He finally looked at her. You're making this bigger than it is. Danielle stood. Where did it go? It went toward an investment. What investment? You wouldn't understand. She laughed once. A small, broken sound. I wouldn't understand? Terrence rubbed his forehead. Danielle, you're tired. You work too much. You're stressed. Don't do that. Do what? Don't make me sound crazy because I found something you didn't want me to find. He stared at her. Then his voice dropped. You've been going through my things. I went through bank statements for our joint account. Same thing. No. She stepped closer. That money belonged to both of us. Terrence said nothing. Danielle asked quietly, Does your mother have something to do with this? His face went completely still. That was her answer. Said. The next morning, Danielle called Patricia. Can I come over? Patricia sounded surprised. Of course. Danielle arrived 20 minutes later. Patricia opened the door wearing a silk robe. You look tired. Danielle stepped inside. I am. Patricia smiled. Well, you work too much. Danielle looked at her. Did you receive money from Terrence? Patricia's smile vanished. What kind of question is that? A direct one. Patricia walked toward the kitchen. You're accusing me of something? I asked you a question. Patricia turned. You need to be careful. Danielle's voice remained calm. Why? Because you don't understand what you're dealing with. Danielle felt something shift inside her. What does that mean? Patricia sighed. Terrence is my son, and I'm his wife. Exactly. Patricia folded her arms. You've always made everything about yourself. Danielle shook her head. No, I've spent 11 years making everything about everyone else. Patricia looked away. Danielle continued. I worked 5 jobs. You chose to. I paid the mortgage. You wanted the house. I paid Terrence's bills. You wanted to help your husband. I paid Terrence's bills. Patricia's expression tightened. And now you're keeping score? Danielle stared at her. No. She stepped toward the door. I'm finally counting what I gave away. Patricia said nothing. Danielle reached for the handle. Then Patricia spoke. You think Terrence doesn't know what you've been saying about him? Danielle turned. What have I said? That he's lazy. I never said that. You didn't have to. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You made him feel worthless. Danielle's voice broke. I loved him. Patricia looked at her coldly. Sometimes love isn't enough. Danielle nodded. You're right. Then she walked out. 2 weeks later, the truth began unraveling. Evelyn discovered that the signature on the property document had likely been improperly executed. The notary listed on the document had no record of meeting Danielle. That meant someone had potentially created a fraudulent transfer. But the biggest surprise came when Evelyn found another document, a proposed refinancing agreement. It showed Terrence intended to use the house as collateral for a business loan. If the loan had gone through, Danielle could have been left responsible for debt she had never approved. Danielle sat in Evelyn's office, staring at the paperwork. So he was going to risk our house? Yes. For his company? Yes. Danielle closed her eyes. Why? Evelyn looked at her carefully. People sometimes make terrible decisions when they become desperate to prove they're successful. Danielle thought about Terrence, the man who once told her he wanted to provide for his family, the man who now seemed obsessed with looking successful to people who didn't care how hard she worked. Then she understood. Terrence hadn't been building a business. He had been building an image, and Danielle had been paying for it. The final confrontation happened at Patricia's house. Danielle asked Terrence to meet her there. When she arrived, Patricia, Kiara, and Terrence were already sitting in the living room. Danielle walked in holding a folder. Terrence looked nervous. What is this? Danielle placed the folder on the coffee table. Everything, Patricia frowned. What does that mean? Danielle opened it. Bank statements. She placed one down. $18,500. Another. $6,000. Another. $4,200. Then the property document. Then the refinancing application. Then the notary records. Nobody spoke. Danielle looked at Terrence. You were going to put our house at risk. Terrence stood. Danielle, listen. No. Her voice was quiet. No more explanations. Kiara shifted uncomfortably. Patricia looked furious. You've been spying on your husband. Danielle turned toward her. No. I've been investigating what my husband did with our money. Terrence's shoulders dropped. Danielle continued. I spent 3 years believing I had to work harder because you were struggling. She looked at him. But you weren't struggling. You were hiding. Terrence's eyes filled. I was ashamed. Danielle's expression softened for half a second. Then she remembered the dinner. She's always been better at working than being a wife. Her eyes hardened again. You were ashamed, so you made me the villain. Terrence whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did. Patricia stood. Danielle, you need to calm down. Danielle looked at her. No. Patricia blinked. For the first time in 11 years, I'm going to say exactly what I think. The room went silent. I was your son's wife, not his servant. Terrence looked down. You all watched me destroy myself trying to keep this family together. Her voice trembled. And instead of asking whether I was okay, you complained that I wasn't doing enough. Kiara's eyes filled. Danielle looked at her. You knew. Kiara shook her head. I didn't know everything. But you knew something. Kiara began crying. I knew Mom was helping Terrence with the company. Helping him steal? No. Danielle waited. Kiara finally whispered. He told us the house would eventually belong to the company. Terrence closed his eyes. Danielle stared at him. So it was planned. Terrence whispered. Not like that. How then? He had no answer. Danielle picked up the folder. I'm done. Terrence looked up. Are you leaving me? Danielle paused. For 11 years, she had imagined that question would destroy her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. I don't know what happens to our marriage yet. Terrence's face changed. But I know what happens to me. She looked around the room. I stop abandoning myself to make other people comfortable. The legal process took months. The fraudulent transfer was challenged. The refinancing application was stopped. The money trail was documented. Terrence eventually admitted that he had used Danielle's income to make investments and impress his family because he couldn't accept feeling unsuccessful. Patricia denied knowing how far things had gone. But the records told a different story. The rental property was sold. The money was returned. The house remained protected. and Danielle finally stopped working 5 jobs. Not because she became wealthy overnight, because she realized she didn't have to carry everyone anymore. She kept her medical billing position. She dropped the overnight cleaning shifts. She stopped driving deliveries every weekend. She started sleeping again. She started going to church without worrying about rushing somewhere afterward. She started calling old friends. She started laughing. Real laughter. The kind Terrence hadn't heard from her in years. Terrence moved into a small apartment. For the first time in years, he had to live with the consequences of his choices. He eventually found steady work. Not glamorous work. Not impressive work. Honest work. And for once, that was enough. Months later, he asked Danielle if they could talk. They met at a quiet coffee shop. Terrence looked different, not physically. Humility had changed his face. "I owe you an apology," he said. Danielle looked at him. "I know." He swallowed. "I treated your sacrifice like it was your responsibility." Danielle said nothing. "I let my shame turn into anger." She nodded slowly. "I know. And when my family criticized you, I let them. That one hurt." Danielle looked down at her coffee. "That was the part I couldn't forgive." Terrence's eyes became wet. "I know." There was a long silence. Finally, he said, "I called you a servant." Danielle looked up. "Yes." "I'll regret that for the rest of my life." She studied him. "Good." He nodded. "I deserve that." Danielle took a slow breath. "I don't know whether we'll ever be husband and wife again." "I understand. But I hope you become the man you once promised me you were." Terrence smiled sadly. "I hope so too." They hugged. Not like husband and wife. Not like strangers. Like two people who had survived something that changed them forever. A year later, Danielle stood on the back porch of the same house. The Atlanta evening was warm. Music played softly from a speaker. Her closest friends were gathered around a table filled with food. There were no 5 jobs anymore. No secret transfers. No locked phones. No pretending. Just peace. Danielle looked through the glass door at the house she had nearly lost. She remembered the woman she used to be. The woman who thought love meant enduring anything. The woman who believed saying no made her selfish. The woman who worked until her body hurt because she was terrified that if she stopped, everything would collapse. She smiled. Everything had collapsed. And somehow, she was still standing. Her friend Monica walked beside her. "You okay?" Danielle looked toward the sunset. "Yeah. You sure?" Danielle smiled. For the first time in a long time, Monica squeezed her shoulder. "You know what I learned from all this?" Danielle laughed. "What?" "You can love somebody deeply and still refuse to let them destroy you." Danielle nodded. "That took me a long time to learn." She looked out over the quiet neighborhood. And for the first time, the house didn't feel like something she had to protect. It felt like home. Her life, her second chance. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. Sometimes justice is waking up one morning and realizing the person who tried to make you feel worthless no longer has the power to define your worth. Danielle had spent years proving she could carry everyone. Her greatest victory was finally realizing she didn't have to. And perhaps that was the lesson Terrence never understood. A marriage isn't supposed to have a servant. It is supposed to have 2 people carrying the weight together. And when one person keeps taking while the other keeps giving, eventually, love becomes exhaustion. But when the giving stops, sometimes a person finally gets the chance to meet themselves again. Danielle did. And this time, she chose herself.